So blended learning usually refers to a combination of what we might call traditional, that is face-to-face instruction, a tutor or teacher or a coach or whatever terminology you use, working with a student in a face-to-face environment in real time. This would involve group classes, one-to-one classes, the kind of things that we have traditionally done. In blended learning, this kind of synchronous, real-time, face-to-face instruction is supplemented, or some people would say augmented, by some materials which are computer mediated. Now these might be activities that are done online. They could be using an internet connection, using a browser. They could be synchronous activities with other students using video conferencing technology, for example. Or they could be perhaps even more traditional computer mediated things such as gap fills, true-false questions, these kind of things. What we might traditionally call, I guess, courseware. So that's where we get the term blend from. We're blending or mixing face-to-face with computer mediated or online instruction or language practice. There's a lot of discussion as to what makes the perfect blend. You'll often hear people talking about percentages. You know, it's 80% face-to-face, 20% online or computer mediated. A lot of this discussion is really quite spurious. The perfect blend for one of your students will really depend on a lot of factors, such as how much time they have available, whether they want face-to-face classes, whether they like working with computers. There are all sorts of factors which can contribute to whether we choose or not to go down a blended path, and if we do, how much of what we do is face-to-face and how much of what we do is computer or technology mediated. The benefits of learning online or learning with computer mediated instruction, I guess, are some of the benefits which we traditionally hear about with distance learning. You'll often see anytime, any place, anywhere, these kind of words used with online instruction, often accompanied by a picture of a man or a woman, you know, in a business suit with their trouser legs rolled up as they wander around the surf on a palm-fringed beach, you know, supposedly catching up with their work or with the online course they're doing. And certainly computer-mediated instruction can provide a certain amount of flexibility. You can decide, well, to an extent, decide where you do things and when you do them. Although a lot of research into distance education and online education actually shows people doing this kind of work in their lunch hours at work, or, you know, late at night, often after the kids and partners have gone to bed. But you certainly do get a bit of flexibility, and I think when we look at the benefits, we have to look at different benefits. Obviously, for the teacher, there are benefits in terms of how much they can spread themselves around. A teacher working in a blended environment can potentially work with a lot more students, because obviously they're spending less time face-to-face with people. Less time travelling, less money travelling, all those kind of things. From an HR perspective, of course, it can be attractive. You're often not having to cancel classes or reschedule classes because people can catch up online. So there are all sorts of advantages. In many ways, we need to think about, you know, if we're trying to think of the advantages, we need to think about what we do in class. You know, some things we do in class we don't necessarily need to do in class. We don't need to be there interacting with someone while they do them. You could think about things like grammar exercises, for example. There's often no great need for a face-to-face class to involve a teacher watching someone doing a grammar exercise. And indeed, if you think if you take this further, then we might perhaps spend some of our time watching people writing, or watching people listening, or watching people reading. There are all sorts of activities that we don't necessarily need to do in class. And so I think one of the ways of looking at this is that there's a certain amount of spade work, or kind of regular hard work involved in learning a language. So things like language and grammar practice, or plenty of listening, those kind of things which can quite easily be devolved to technology, to a computer, to an internet connection. And that potentially does free up some time in class for potentially richer interactions between teacher and student. And I suppose for me, those are where the big advantages lie, apart from the obvious time saving and that kind of thing. The potential, I think, biggest advantage is that you can then really, in the face-to-face time, drill down with people, work on the things that they're having trouble with, work on the things that are of greater interest to them, and let the technology handle some of the more mundane, less exciting parts of the learning. In terms of skills, not an awful lot really. I think a simple ability to be able to obviously open a web page, answer emails. People will potentially need audio equipment, so headsets with microphones, perhaps for speaking activities or pronunciation activities. But a lot of these are sort of more prosaic technology questions which can be sorted out very, very quickly, I think. They become potentially more problematic in corporate environments, where often corporates have a lot of restrictions on what computers can do and what they can access and the equipment available to them. They often don't run multimedia, for example, because that's traditionally been seen as a distraction within a work environment. But the skill set is minimal. I think anyone who can study face-to-face can study in a blended environment with a minimum of training. That's on the side of the student. And that obviously is predicated on the materials being easily accessible and easily usable. And I guess really when we talk about training for blended, we'd be talking more about teachers, because teachers not only need to be trained in the technology side of things and be able to provide a certain amount of technical support and that kind of thing, but they also need to be trained in the kind of materials development side of things. So what can you do? What can be mediated by technology? What works well, what doesn't? And then how does it work? What platform should I choose? Should I put my supplementary materials on Moodle? Or is something, I don't know, maybe I could use a closed Facebook group or Edmodo or something. So the teacher actually does need a wider set of skills in order to, I think, go about a successful implementation of blended learning. And those kind of skills are picked up in the kind of course that you're doing right now, in other courses that we run, like the CERT ICT, teaching live online, these kind of courses, and obviously courses provided by other companies who work in the same environment as we do. But it's a mistake, I think, to assume that a good face-to-face teacher is going to be a good online teacher or a good mediator of blended learning. And these skills are skills that need to be acquired and honed, like the sort of normal, if you like, teaching skills that we spend most of our careers honing. I think you may find these days that actually selling a blended course is not such a big deal. I think maybe 5 years ago it might have been a more tricky prospect in a way. People were less confident with technology. They used technology a lot less. But of course, mobile phones and tablets and things have increased people's familiarity and comfort with technology, and actually increased their reliability on technology. So lots of people are much more happy, I think, to use technology for a variety of things these days, not just listening to music and playing games, for example. So areas to concentrate on, I think, are probably learning for one, if you take full advantage of a blended course, you can probably learn more than in just a face-to-face course, because you're going to get more exposure. Obviously, if the teacher provides you with a wide variety of materials, you can put in more or less time, so you can make a bigger investment in your own learning, again, provided the materials are there. They are time saving, they cut down on travel, they minimize the disruption caused by having to cancel a class due to unforeseen circumstances. They're much more attractive, as I think I've already mentioned, to HR and people like that. But I would say really it's partially the control that you get over how and when you learn, and also the potential exposure to a lot more materials. And I think there's in many ways there's an economic, or there should be an economic advantage to a good blended learning program. So it should be cheaper, more flexible. And of course, these days, those kind of things, those kind of concepts are incredibly attractive to most people. In terms of things that go wrong, I think obviously we have things like technology. Technology can go wrong. And I think we need ways of mitigating for that, and making sure that if it's not working today, it's working tomorrow, that people have time to access these kind of things. But also, I think preparing students for those kind of things. A lot of the potential issues with anything related to technology are issues which can be dealt with by talking about expectations, discussing expectations, and working through those. So when do you expect to study? Do you expect the technology to work all the time? Do you expect me to be online all the time? All these kind of things are expectations that people might have. So I think a lot of the potential problems, apart from, as I've said before, the prosaic technology problems of an internet connection not working or that kind of thing, most of these are to do with people's expectations of what they expect online. And those are the kind of things that can be dealt with pretty swiftly before a course starts. So making sure that people know what they're going to get, when they're going to get it, how much work they're expected to do, those kind of things. Managing those expectations is incredibly important. Another area which is potentially problematic is that some people just simply do not take to the technology. Blended and online programs suffer or tend to suffer from fairly high dropout rates, and these are usually connected to problems of access, sometimes problems to do with time, with being able to commit time. It's much easier for someone to come to a physical class in a way because there's a greater expectation that they will turn up. When it's computer mediated, of course, people don't necessarily feel that kind of obligation. So I think a lot of these things, a lot of the ways in which these programs fail are not things connected with technology. They're usually connected with quality of materials, quality of interactions, making sure people's expectations are explored, explained or dealt with if they're unrealistic expectations. And as a teacher, providing that level of support that we provide in class, also outside of class, making sure that we are there for people. We're there to help them work through any issues they have, to keep them on track, to keep them motivated. There's a certain level of coaching involved in this kind of learning. But having said all that, blended learning clearly works. It works for plenty of people, and these days it works for plenty of large organisations. And even on the financial imperative, this is one thing that isn't going away. So definitely worth exploring. I hope that's cleared up some of the bigger issues that might have come up already or might be coming up.